Well, I want to say good morning to everybody here in person. We have a lot of friends that are joining us online as well. And like Pastor Ben had mentioned, we are entering into a campus Sunday. And so here and across all of our locations, our campus pastors get the joy of preaching. And so that is my honor. A fun kind of milestone for me is this past week, Annie and I and our family are celebrating 1 year being a part of the Westwood community. So it's been a joy. Thank you. That's so kind of you to be enthusiastic too, because that's good that you like us here too. But we love you guys. And I'm looking here, water-stained steps, and it just reminds you that God's on the move. And what a powerful thing to see that in the act of baptism. And my prayer for you, I think this is something we all may want in our lives, that collectively we're feeling that sense God is among us, He's with us, He's for us, He's through us. But I really pray that that's true for you personally, that you in the depths of your own journey with God feel that presence, that He's with you, that He's for you, that He's working through you. And that's ultimately what we believe as people that follow Jesus, that is who God is. He's on the move, He's among us. And here's the most amazing thing, the fullness of God's presence is still to come. So we get a foretaste, we get a preview of all the goodness that's at hand. And when heaven collides with earth and God's fullness is with us and His presence is with us, we're going to be taken by the wonder of what that's going to be like. And kind of in the space in between those moments, where we are now to where history is going, God with us in His fullness, you and I you could say we have a job to do. We have an invitation, maybe is a better way to say it, and that's to be in love like Jesus, to do our best to represent to the world that there's a God who loves them and that has a plan for their life. And I've been reflecting on that invitation we all have to be in love like Jesus, and I'm reminded of this. Maybe I'm sorely reminded of this because I have 4 children that run around, is I don't always do that. I'm going to miss it sometimes, and how I want to present myself as a person who follows Jesus, sometimes it doesn't really line up. And, that may be one of the most frustrating things about our human experience. And not even just with our faith, many things. We have many different identities or hats that we wear as parents, as students, as workers, as neighbors. There's going to be these moments in our lives where who we want to be and who we are just a little bit off. And it's those incongruent moments that people notice. And people are going to say, yeah, that's a person who follows Jesus. The things that they're doing, the things that they're saying, and the way that they're going about life, that seems to match up. Or sometimes, because people may know what we believe or may think they know what we believe, they may look at our lives and say, well, that's interesting. That didn't necessarily line up with what I thought they would do because of what I believe they say. And so, that's really James. The book of James, what we've been spending the better part of the summer in, it's his own kind of reflections that, boy, sometimes we miss it. And there are some things that maybe we should have attention towards so that we can work on maybe the incongruencies that sometimes show up in our lives. And so, James is an interesting book because as he goes out to do that, he does it in more of a general way than a specific way. Some of the letters that we're used to from a guy like Paul, they're very specific letters written to very specific people addressing very specific issues. James, he was at a point where he was maybe frustrated or he was concerned about things that were happening in the ancient world, people that professed to follow Jesus all over. And instead of, maybe doing what we do sometimes where we write a text message or send an email, or some of us may post on social media, but what we're really trying to do is tell somebody something, but we don't really package it that way. Instead of doing all those things, he wrote a letter. But he wrote a general letter. He wrote to a general audience. If you remember from James chapter 1, he wrote to the 12 tribes scattered among the nations. It was a very general group of people. He didn't write like we see Paul writing to a group in Ephesus or in Corinth or in Rome, right? These weren't letters addressed to very specific people. These were letters addressed to a wide range of people. And he wrote about very general topics, what you could argue are kind of the trip-ups that we all may encounter in this pursuit, a very authentic pursuit many of us have to be and love like Jesus. And our passage today is about a topic that I think is everyone's favorite in church. and I'm going to have you say it with me on three, okay? So on three, everyone's favorite topic in church. 1, 2, 3, money. Whew. No wonder it's a day the campus pastors are going to preach. But hey, let me be real with you. I actually think it's really good that we can talk about money in church because, money is something that we can't not interact with. It's something that is a part of our life. It's something that we're not going to be able to escape. And so I believe if we can understand money through the lens of our faith, that can be a really good thing because it will help us have a godly handle on our money, which sometimes the opposite can be true in our lives. And that is money can have an ungodly handle on us. And so James is addressing that very topic. And for those of you who have been with us over the last couple of weeks here in the summer, James can be a little bit, direct. And so I'm just giving you that as a forewarning. Your seats did not come with buckles, but you may want to buckle up as we look to James chapter 5, verse 1. Here are these inspiring words from James. Look here, you rich people. Weep and groan with anguish because of all the terrible troubles ahead of you. Your wealth is rotting away, and your fine clothes are moth-eaten rags. Your gold and silver are corroded. The very wealth you are counting on will eat away your flesh like fire. He is not done. This corroded treasure you have hoarded will testify against you on the day of judgment. For listen, hear the cries of the field workers whom you have cheated out of their pay. The cries of those who harvest your fields have reached the ears of the Lord of heaven's armies. One more. You have spent your years on earth in luxury, satisfying your every desire. You have fattened yourselves on the day of slaughter. You have condemned and killed innocent people who do not resist you. Whew. Thanks, James. You really know how to win us over? We got some winsome, tender words. Nope, that is not what's happening here. These are some really strong words. I wonder, this is a letter, right? And James at some point had to write this down, pen to parchment. And I wonder when he got to this section, what was he like? I mean, were his teeth clenched? Was he pressing down on the paper? Sometimes these letters were dictated. So there was a scribe whose job was to listen in to someone that was conveying a message, and they're going as fast as they can. And I wonder what the scribe was thinking when James got to this part of his. It feels like a diatribe almost. And, boy, he's not happy. And, the other thing with these ancient general letters is they were circular in nature. And so, 12 tribes scattered among the nations, how this would go is the letter was delivered to a specific church community, probably a house church community of some sort, and it was read front to back. They didn't necessarily read the scriptures like we read them today with chapters and verses, and I'm going to take a piece here and a piece there. They got a scroll. And so they're reading, and by the time they got to that part of the letter, whoever was reading it was probably like, why did I get chosen to be the person to read right now? And then it would be passed off to the next community, and then they would read the letter in its entirety. And so these are biting words. James, you could say it, at the very least, is not happy. But why? What's got him so frustrated, irate? I kind of like how Eugene Peterson has something called the Message Paraphrase. And what he does is he takes the scriptures and puts them in a little bit more modern day vernacular. I kind of like the imagery of what he did on these verses. So let's listen to his rendition here. And a final word to you, arrogant rich. Take some lessons in lament. You'll need buckets for the tears when the crash comes upon you. Your money is corrupt and your fine clothes stink. Your greedy luxuries are a cancer in your gut, destroying your life from within. You thought you were piling up wealth. What you've piled up is judgment. All the workers you've exploited and cheated cry out for judgment. The groans of the workers you used and abused are a roar in the ears of the master avenger. You've looted the earth and lived it up. And then this next line is just arresting. But all you have to show for it is a fatter than usual corpse. In fact, what you've done is condemn and murder perfectly good persons who stand there and take it. So, here's an unsurprising first reaction to this passage. My reaction too. I don't think this applies to me. This is obviously addressed to some group of wealthy, arrogant, rich landowners in ancient times who, lived fat cat lives that were possible by riding the backs of poor and powerless people. And, from a contextual standpoint, bullseye. That is who James is talking to here. Land was a source of wealth in the ancient world. And so if you found yourself in maybe a difficult place, if you had a loan to pay off or you had debts, what you would typically do is sell your land in order to try to get back to even. And guess who was waiting in the wings, waiting to snatch up land at a discounted rate and turn that into a profitable venture by employing debt-ridden and unskilled workers? Well, the people that were able to do that were the people that already owned land. They had the resource to purchase more and more. You could say the rich may be getting richer and the poor may be getting poorer. And James cries out with an impassioned and fiery rhetoric, you're not going to get away with that. God sees what's happening. And the poorest of the poor are crying out to him in their slavery, and he hears them. And so if you're a rich landowner that's hoarding away cash, or if you're spending on credit like there's no tomorrow, a day is coming where the tables will turn on you. And your workers are lamenting now. Well, guess what? When the last become first and the first become last, you're going to need buckets for all of your tears when the crash comes on you. Or you think what you're storing up is all fun stuff. You're piling up a lot of judgment because why didn't you do anything with your excess to help those that are in need? And as I kind of let that message percolate in my own spirit, as you maybe hear that, I'm saying, James, good on you. I'm glad you got the gusto to call out those rich, arrogant, wealthy landowners of ancient times. You tell them, James. But as with many scriptures, I don't know if we should be so quick to kind of gloss over the passage and say, nothing for me here. Doesn't apply to me. Because even though our context and our situations are no doubt very, very different, I think James is trying to shake some people out of a lifestyle that I don't think they intended to get to in the first place. Remember, this is a Christian letter. It's written to Christian people. These are people in a house church that are so eager to hear from the father of the church in Jerusalem, and he decides to put this in the letter? Does that mean these were Christians exhibiting such ungodly conduct? And if so, how in the world did they get there? And then here's a sobering question for us. Is it possible we could get there too? Because none of us are going to be automatically immune to every vice or corruption or misstep the moment we follow God. We all know one of the key frustrations of what it means to try and pursue this thing with authenticity, our faith with authenticity, is that we will miss it sometimes. But God's grace is there for us. And I'm so glad that he's not interested in our perfect performance. He's interested in the conditions of our heart. But remember, James's point is that your heart will bear itself out in your words and in your actions. And we need these letters. We need the guiding of the Holy Spirit. We need Christian community. It helps bring to light the things that are hidden in darkness so that we can actually rely on God's power to do something about it. So our lives can actually line up with our faith, that we can actually be more congruent with who we are and who we want to be. And so James felt the urge to call this group of people out. And again, I honestly think it's because they maybe couldn't see it themselves. It's very likely that the appetite that they had for wealth and for status had blinded them to what was happening. You could say it this way: their money betrayed them. Money is a unique dimension of our lives. Throughout history, it's taken many forms. In these ancient times, money is land and produce and crops and livestock. It's very physical. You can see it. The people with more were rich. But then over time, the modality of wealth changed. It became coins of precious metal, or it became pieces of paper with government backing, or in today's day and age, it's numbers on a digitized screen. Money has taken many, many different forms throughout history, but maybe what remains consistent is how we connect with money. Almost this fact that money has a presence to it, that we can have a relationship with our money. And some of us, if we reflect on that, we may have a distant relationship with our money. It may be like a distant cousin of sorts. We don't want to think about it. It's, if we're honest, a little too stressful. Others of us, if you want to swing the pendulum to the other side, maybe we have a little bit of an obsessive relationship with money. Maybe it's all we think about. It's all we talk about. Maybe it's the first thing that registers in my mind when we wake up in the morning and our phones are right there to see how the stocks did or where the rates are. So here's a question for you. What's your relationship with money? Is it your comfort, your security, your happiness, your distant cousin, your obsession? When money comes into your mind, what do you start to think about? What is it? What do you feel? Do you feel worry? Do you feel anxiety? Do you feel happiness? Do you feel peace? And when it comes to how you work with money, how you deal with money, are you a saver? Are you my wife who says, I'm a saver, but I'm a saver to spender? Are you just a spender? Doesn't matter if you save money or not. Are you a gambler? Are you a money maker? All of us have a relationship. We have a connection. We have a way with money. And I think an important question for us who want to be and love like Jesus is, what should our relationship with money be? Because money has power. There was a psychologist at the University of California. His name's Dr. Paul Piff. And about 10 years ago, he asked the research question, what is the effect of money on people? And so he set up a little experiment on the campus of the University of California using America's favorite board game, Monopoly. And so the experiment went like this. 2 University of California students were picked at random, and they were pitted against one another in a game of Monopoly. But this game began with a coin flip. And depending on who won the coin flip, that lucky winner had a couple advantages throughout the game. First, they started with $300 instead of $100. They got to use 2 dice instead of 1 as they went around the board. And every time they passed around go, they got to collect $200 versus the other person's $100. You could say one player was richer, another player was poor. And they did this with 100 pairs of students, and they recorded it on video. And you can watch some of these videos online. It's fascinating. And here's what they observed. Almost minutes into the game, the dynamics changed, and the richer player, person who kind of had that advantage by winning the coin flip, began to behave differently. They noticed that they became more dominant, they were less gracious, they were ruder, they were bragging about how well they did, and some even were belittling the other player for not doing as well. Now, here's the most fascinating part about this study. When the game was over and who inevitably won, they asked each student, how did it go? And not one of the victorious students acknowledged that the reason they had won the game was because the coin toss was in their favor to begin with. They talked about their strategies. They talked about all the things that they were able to do to win the game. Not one of them acknowledged the coin toss gave him an advantage. Piff's research looks at the effect of wealth on individuals, and he makes some conclusions that are very sobering. He concludes that increasing levels of wealth can leave people feeling more entitled, more deserving of their good fortune, and more likely to moralize that those who have less have what's coming to them. His research in other experiments also finds that as wealth increases, the inclinations in people to lie when negotiating, to endorse unethical behavior, to cheat, and even break the law also rise. Sound a lot like those wealthy landowners from ancient times, doesn't it? And I think they, just like those unsuspecting UC students playing a weighted game of Monopoly, because they weren't deeply thinking about the effect of money, unrestrained money, on their lives, they ended up in a place where the character and the ways of Jesus were sadly scarce in their financial and business dealings. And the only thing that could shake them out was an impassioned plea to stop the madness and see with new eyes maybe what was happening to them. Because the gravitational pull of wealth and money in a broken world, a world that can be bent on things like greed or self-interest or control, it can take you to some places that you never intended to go. Money has power. Jesus believed this about money. In fact, 4 out of every 10 parables that Jesus taught was about this very topic. If you look at the scriptures as a whole, there are 2,000 verses on money. Other things that are important, faith, prayer, they're the focus of about 500 verses apiece. So you just think of the weighting here. It kind of brings to light that this is something that we should pay attention to. This is something that we need to talk about. And as the church, I maybe get a little bit frustrated that we've made it difficult to talk about. We've either made it a taboo because money's too personal and we don't want to get into all of that, or sometimes we've been so taken by the lure and thrill of money that maybe it's all we want to talk about. And so it gets awkward. It may get a little bit, some of us get a little squirmy when this topic comes up in church because I don't think maybe we've modeled well enough how to do that with grace and with truth. And so I think an important question is, what does Jesus have to say? How do we relate to our money? Well, he went as far as to say that money can actually be a master in your life. Talk about power. Here it is in Matthew 6:24, Jesus' words, "No one can serve 2 masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." Some translations bring the Aramaic slang word that Jesus uses for money right into English. The word is mammon. You can't serve both God and mammon, or if we were to use our modern day slang, you can't serve both God and cash, Benjamins, moolah. All of us have some name for money. And here's what he didn't say you can't do it. He said you can't serve 2 masters. He said it's going to be darn near impossible if money has become a master in your life for you to see God as first and foremost in all the things that you want to be able to do. And so if money is that powerful, how can we either break its control in our lives, or actually I think this may be a better way to think about it, how can we be better positioned to harness its power for goodness and for blessing? Because money is not inherently good or evil. Money is an important and needed dimension of our lives, and it's a part of our society. But as Christians, I think it's important for us to acknowledge that even though money doesn't have inherent moral identity, it is inherently powerful. And money will either ride the wave of our broken and sinful world, and that can lead to things like death and destruction, or it can ride the wave of God's Spirit, and that can lead to goodness and blessing. And so maybe one final question for you to think about. Are you trying to serve 2 masters? Because when money is one of your masters, you're going to find yourself in one of 2 ditches. Same ditches that those ancient landowners found themselves in. And the first ditch is you just want to control. And there'll never be enough of how much you can have to feel security. And so you may save, and it may feel like you're hoarding, because the need for control and the need for security may outweigh your faith to trust in God to meet your every need. Or you may fall in another ditch and you may spend, and it may get out of control. And maybe that's because a certain feeling or a certain identity or a certain status may outpace the true identity we all carry as people who are children of God. And I think that's what James was trying to get some of the wealthiest churchgoers to realize. They fell in the ditch. James is saying it's going to mean so little when God comes in his fullness, all the land and the gold and the silver and the clothes, or in our modern times, all the cars and the shoes and the crypto wallets and the retirement accounts. Who knows what it is? The list can go on and on. It's all not going to matter like we think it matters when God is in our midst in undeniable ways. And so James is crying out to them, and he's crying out to all of us, what are you doing? Why did you fall in the ditch? Why are you more concerned with going after more for the sake of more instead of channeling that resource toward the things of God and helping others in need? It reminds me of maybe one of the more powerful scenes in cinematic history. This is Steven Spielberg's 1993 classic, Schindler's List. The movie recaps the story of a fictitious character who comes to wealth during the Nazi campaign of World War II. And the reason he comes to wealth is because he leads a manufacturing division, a manufacturing company that is producing material that's needed for war. And then Oskar Schindler has this profound experience in his life where he witnesses firsthand some of the atrocities of the Holocaust. And he decides to turn his company into a front in order to hide those that were going toward massacre, to hide Jewish refugees. And in order to make that happen, he pays off soldiers to not inspect what's happening. He pays other companies to manufacture the goods that his operations were supposed to make so that he could hide as many Jews as he could. Toward the end of the movie, it becomes very clear to Oskar Schindler that he has to run away. He has to go west. He's going to surrender to the Americans. And there's this sobering, it's almost an unnerving scene toward the end of the movie where he bids farewell to all of the workers that have had their lives saved by his willingness to sacrifice for them. And these Jewish workers are so moved by what Oskar did that they present him with a ring. And in the inside of the ring is an engraving from the words of a Jewish writing called the Talmud. And in there it says, "Whoever saves one life saves the world entire." And if some of you know this scene of the movie, you can watch it on YouTube later if you want to see it. It will wreck you. But Oskar unravels. And he falls to his knees and he looks at all the last things that he has in his possession, the ring, the clothes, the car that's going to take him to flee. And he starts to assign a number to each one. This could have been 2 more people. That could have been 10. That could have been 15. And he realizes something that maybe most of us only realize the moment heaven and earth collide. And that's that everything we have comes from God. Everything we have belongs to God. And we have the power to channel all we've been given to serve God's purposes. You know, the power of money was rechanneled almost in Oskar Schindler's life. A member of the Nazi Party and a war profiteer, when he realized he was blessed to be a blessing. When he decided to give, to sacrifice, to enter into what we at Westwood call living with open hands. We call it our rhythm of life, gratefully receiving from God and joyfully giving away. And this rhythm of life is not something we just practice with our money. We practice with everything that we have because everything comes from God. He is first a giver. We are first receivers. And what has he given us? Hope, love, grace, forgiveness. The open-handed life is the invitation to say, because I have received, I will give. And so I will give out hope and grace and forgiveness and goodness, even money. And what's returned to God is honor, glory, and praise. And because he's a good God, he gives all the more. Living with open hands, this is not a get-rich-quick scheme. This is not a give-to-get program. This is a way that breaks the temptation in our lives for things like greed or control or self-interest. I mean, just think about all the things that can happen if we live with closed hands, thinking everything is for me, everything belongs to me, everything is from me. You know, you may find yourself in a very similar predicament to those ancient landowners, to those unsuspecting UC students playing America's favorite board game, to a young Oskar Schindler making loads of money manufacturing materials for war. You may be more likely to hoard. You may be more likely to spend for status. You maybe won't see the injustices that are around you. And I think James would say to all of them, just like he wants to say to all of us, if you find yourself with closed hands, open them up. Because we need those with resource. God has blessed you. And this is not about any of us needing to feel guilt or shame for what we've been given. This is not about us comparing our wealth or maybe our lack of it to someone else. This is about us stewarding all the blessing we've been given by God for His honor. So may we live with open hands. May we live with a posture that truly believes that we're God's instrument. And so let's ask the question, God, what would you want me to do? And I believe this, in very specific ways, God will prompt you and He will nudge you on how you can channel the power of money for goodness and blessing. And that will be a thrilling joy as you step into that. But again, we're reading a general letter from James. And so can I give you a general invitation? Because the Christian approach and how we steward our money, it's pretty simple. And as I invite you to consider these as next steps, I don't want you to feel like what I'm trying to do is be overly prescriptive, because I know all of our situations are different. Money is very personal to all of us. But I think there are two ways that we can enter into that will break the power of money, or maybe better yet, to channel the power of money in your life to the honor of God. And the first one is to live below your means. And the second one is to give beyond your comfort. There's always going to be someone who has more than you in this world, and there will also always be someone that has less than you too. And so instead of playing the comparison game, simply live at a level below what you could. You could have more. You could keep more. Instead, live below that as a way to be content with less, to trust God for your needs, to be in solidarity with those who have less, and to protect the margin in your life to be givers. And as you enter into the joy of giving, may I encourage you to also give beyond your comfort, not as a badge of honor, but as a way, again, to grow your faith, to trust God and to be in solidarity with those that trust Him every day for even the simplest of necessities. So may God stretch you in what you think is possible in your generosity. And you know what could maybe happen in your life? You may be prompted to live even further below your means. You may even be prompted to sacrifice, not out of an altruistic ego that says, God, look at all the things I'm doing for you, but out of a trusting love for God so that you can give all the more. So may this radical power of God's provision and generosity take a hold of your life. And as it does, the lure and the thrill of money that entices us to maybe keep more or have more than we need, especially that temptation in a self-interested world. May all of that bow to the Master, Jesus. Remember, you cannot serve two masters. And so may we serve Jesus with everything we have, even our money, gratefully receiving, joyfully giving, living below our means, giving beyond our comfort, all with open hands. And to that honor, God will be praised. So I invite you to enter into that posture with me. Will you open your hands? And I want to pray a prayer of blessing over all of you. So God, you see every hand that's open, and it may be an acknowledgement for some of us that we fell in the ditch. And God, can you help us climb out? Will you give us the strength and the grace to know that we can move forward in a way that gives you honor and glory and praise by living with open hands, living below our means and giving beyond our comfort so that you are praised. God, money is deeply personal and it's deeply powerful. And so as we consider in our hearts how we steward money, where we rely on your grace more than ever, and may you give us the hope to move forward with our money and with everything that we've been given so that you receive honor, glory, and praise. We pray that now in Jesus' name. And everybody said, amen.